Hey guys, so before we begin the video, I encourage you to share the video. Leave a like and a comment right now. Just stop whatever you're doing and leave a comment and share this video because I'd really appreciate it if you did. For algorithm, we're almost at 30K. So guys, enjoy the video and welcome to the jungle. I don't know what that means, guys. Whatever. My first story begins when I lived in Ohio, USA. I was driving back to my house one day with my friends when I saw a girl visiting a graveyard. She was right at the top by a statue of an angel. The girl looked very young, about 11 years old. She was wearing old-fashioned clothes. I went up to the grave the next day. The inscription was written on the angel's Bible. It said in memory of Jane Doe, died 1832 to 1845, died of tuberculosis. I did not use the girl's name out of respect. I now realize that yesterday I'd seen a ghost. I can see the graveyard from where I live, and I always see a girl visit the grave. One time I went up there to see if I could catch a glimpse of the girl. This time, she was bending over two other graves. I went away because I thought the girl was starting to sense my presence. I came back though, and found the two graves. These two were her mother and father. They had also died of tuberculosis. It looked like no one came and took care of this grave. So I would come up there sometimes and clean the graves. When I had finished cleaning the girl's grave one day, I looked up and saw the girl watching me. She was smiling. She followed me home. I wasn't bothered because I knew she was harmless. It was almost like she was an old friend to me. This second set of experiences happened in Wrightwood, California. The interesting thing about the area in particular is that there are constant reported sightings of Indians everywhere. And the women in my family see an older woman around our houses, near the children's rooms. Townspeople who are aware of her say she is a nurse of sorts, and that she checks on the small children of the town, protecting them. The weirdest one so far is the half-Indian. All that is ever seen is the top half of an Indian, head to waist and floating. Most seem to see this figure especially down by the old ranch that sits in Cajun Pass, on Highway 66, between Clegherd Road and Kenwood. That's where the figure would appear. Many times around Thanksgiving, which makes you wonder a little bit. Anyway, my sister has seen him on Lone Pine Ranch Road around Clyde Ranch, the only structure on Lone Pine, until you reach Wrightwood. We have a lot of paranormal activity happening constantly, according to those who are tuned into it, or have that sixth sense. And if one's violent or sudden death brings about that type of activity, then we add approximately 10 spirits every year. Because of the slippery, snow-covered roads like Lone Pine, that, and the lack of common sense that California drivers possess. For years, the ranch my grandpa owns has been the center of many disturbing experiences. Though I did not experience them firsthand, I'm going to tell you some real stories about the place. Now I'm going to start with this ranch was built on an Indian burial ground, or this is what my mom tells me. My mother, Grace, lived there with her dad, sister, and two of her brothers. They only lived there part-time. They lived in San Luis Obispo with my grandmother. They'd go to the ranch on weekends along with my grandfather. My grandmother would stay behind because she hated the ranch. On the 4th of July, my mom had her friend come over, and this is when they were older, maybe in their 20s, and she let her stay in the bedroom with the guy she got close to. So my mom ended up on the couch. In the middle of the night, she sat straight up, like in the horror movies, where people sit straight up, all of a sudden in the middle of their sleep. She had no clue why, but she was so scared to death. She started to look around, and out of nowhere, she started seeing little dashes and wisps of silver light. They would fly right over her, and there would be deep wafts of cold air. She got up and ran to the bedroom. The guy my mom's friend got close to worked at the ranch as a gardener and had experiences like this before, seeing he'd worked there a long time. He said he thinks it's an Indian burial ground, but couldn't be sure. When my mom was young, not such great things happened at the ranch. I only know of one, but I'll tell you about it. My grandpa would bring weird friends that he met to the ranch. There was one guy in particular who came, and every time he'd play a game, where all the boys, including my uncle's friends, would have to play, it was basically a hide-and-seek game. But when he found them, he would pretend to torture them, and he'd throw them in a pool, which definitely wasn't a pleasant thing. My Uncle Martin was so scared of this guy, and he had good reason. This man was an old Vietnam War veteran. You could pretty much call him crazy. My uncle spent most of his days at the ranch, preparing for when he came. He did not want to be found. He had a place ready on this tree with a little stash of candy bars and packet drinks in the ladder that he could pull up after him. When the man came, he found everyone but Martin and looked for him till it was well past dark. Finally, they found him, but he wouldn't come down, and didn't. I had lived at the ranch for about 6 months, and my mom was scared to death of it, so we moved. My dad had lived with us. There was no power, so matches were common. After we had moved, my mom's younger brother Nick and his wife Shelley moved in. They had my little cousins Larry, the oldest, Amanda, second, and Monica, the youngest. My cousin Larry had gotten hold of matches when he climbed out of the crib he was in with Amanda. He climbed back in and started a fire, not knowing the consequences, being as young as he was. My Aunt Shelley was upstairs taking a nap with Monica, and my Uncle Nick was at work. Shelley came out running out of the building and left Monica outside, running back in to get Larry. It was too late for Amanda, and they still have her ashes. Larry lived, but he has third-degree burns that have scarred him permanently. My uncle divorced Shelley due to other problems in their marriage. He got remarried to another woman named Tracy, and together, they had a child named Caitlin Elizabeth. Just a while ago, they figured out she was deaf. My grandpa lived at the ranch regularly till he broke his back. He was riding his horse on a mountain by a steep ravine. Being an experienced rider, he didn't have much of a risk factor. No one knows what, but something spooked the horse and he fell off, down the ravine, and broke his back. Now he's in a wheelchair, and he seems like he'd rather die than not be able to live at the ranch. So far he's not there, but he's trying to get there. Another bit that interests me about my family's ranch is that it tore my mom's side of the family apart. There have been endless fights about it, and pretty much everyone is turned away from each other. Are all these things a coincidence? I don't know, but I find it hard to think of it that way. I went to Santa Catalina summer camp, but it was also a boarding school. For some reason, there is one room that is never open for boarders. It's at the end of the hall in the 4th dorm, and the story about it was that a girl was going there for senior year and was trying to get into Harvard. When she got the rejection letter, she OD'd on sleeping pills. This happened a year or two after my mom had gone there. When I went there for summer camp, there was a girl who said she had gone in there to turn off a light that was on. This was odd, because no one was allowed to go in there. The two girls were curious about the room and snooped around. When they opened the closet, there was red writing all inside the walls of the closet. They screamed and ran out, telling the counselor what they saw. The counselor was clearly scared out of her mind to go into that room. Before she turned off the light, she checked the closet. The walls were clean. Throughout the nights and days at Catalina, the light would turn on without anyone there. The presence was overwhelming and strong. Sometimes just an eerie feeling. You can't prove it, just feel it. I lived in Springfield, Missouri for 5 years, and have been a frequent visitor to the Wilsons Creek battlefield. The place has a presence that you could feel day or night, because it was the site of a good-sized battle, and the park rangers will tell you the same thing of sightings while they patrolled the park, or hearing gunfire and cannons going off. One of the most active spots in the battlefield is the farmhouse that doubled as the field hospital where the wounded were brought in for amputation in the home. But I believe it was a Confederate hospital, if my memory serves me correctly. Last year in June, myself and a few friends were given permission to camp the night at the location so that we could experience the events reported ourselves. One of my friends got his degree in psychology and wanted to see if the reportings were due to the history of the area, and we confirmed everything the park ranger had told us. At midnight, we began to hear what we could have sworn to be low moaning coming from the house, and what we could have sworn were the shadows of several people passing the windows, as well as the footsteps on the front porch. The footsteps would either sound like someone pacing as if on guard duty or waiting, or it would sound like someone running into the home, such as an orderly or a surgeon. But the one thing that remains in my mind was a smell that suddenly just arose around us of blood. It was a heavy smell that lingered in the air, that just made you almost want to scream, because it had an incredible sadness and pain. There was also a constant presence being verified of cold spots that would allow us to see our breath, and this made it very uncomfortable because it was an 85-degree night. The presence would get stronger throughout the night, and finally, when we composed ourselves, I looked at the house and said as loud as I could, "We know you are with us, and we know the sacrifice that you have made. Please leave this place in peace." My friends, of course, gave me that look that I had lost it, but they immediately noticed that there was a calm feeling now, instead of agitation and sadness. Before we left, we placed a small flag and an American flag that we bought, and placed them on either side of the front porch of the field house, and gave them a salute out of respect for the soldiers. I've since moved to Florida, but still keep in contact with my friends as well as the park ranger, and we still talk about that night as well as the other occurrences they've seen on return visits. I hope this helps to prove the skeptics that there is a presence of lost life on that site, and that they want us to know how, so what happened to him will not be repeated to others. I lived in my newly built home for 1 year now. It all started when I woke groggy from sleep. I heard a woman crying and thought perhaps it was my child or neighbor. Her husband would travel often. I realize now that it was a linked experience. It was a couple of days ago, and I'd stayed up late watching TV, started to get tired, and decided to go to sleep. So I walked upstairs and went to my bedroom, laid down, and was fast asleep. I remember dreaming and the woman that I heard for a year crying came to me. She came over me and put one hand on my throat and the other on my mouth and face. She began to strangle me. All I can remember after was willing myself to be awakened. I was flailing, kicking, and trying to scream. That is when I finally awoke. My husband was laying right next to me the whole time. He was also awake after the episode, scared and wondering what the heck he told me, that I was really screaming and tossing all over. You know when you watch someone sleep, and they say they were screaming, it's always muffled. I wasn't. Tonight, me and my sister were making dinner for all the kids, hobo dinners to be exact, and we had made all the kids come in one at a time to pick out their ingredients in their own hobo dinner. If you don't know what hobo dinners are, they have an assortment of vegetables and meat, or chicken, and condensed soup wrapped in aluminum foil. We have made the first three, no hitches. Then came little A, we'll call her that. She picked up her foods and we argued that she had to have more than chicken and broccoli. She didn't want to, but agreed. So I folded hers up and put it into an oven with the other three, realizing that when I put in the fifth one, I would have to move them all. We then proceeded to make the last one, and we never left the kitchen. Upon finishing, I opened the oven and found that little A's dinner was gone. I put it in there myself, and it was not small, not something you could misplace. We searched the entire kitchen and surrounding areas. No dinner. We made her another one, but couldn't get over the lost hobo dinner. We talked about it for a few hours while our husbands researched the kitchen. Then we started talking of related stories, and the woman came up. We joked that she ate it, or our deceased grandma did. Then I told my sister and her husband of my dream experience. My husband chimed in and finished the dream, but I didn't even know the end. He had said that after he had gotten up the next morning, I came out of our bedroom crying and saying that the ghost tried to suffocate me again. Then he said I proceeded to get a glass of water and went back to my room. That happens to be on the top floor and my kitchen on the main. I didn't know that happened. Then he also started talking about an old forgotten coal mine and how a girl died in one here in Littleton, Colorado. So we went online and somehow in our main searches came to this site. Do you think that maybe the deaths of the miners and their families are still here, reminding us of all the injustices they faced in their lives? Or are they just wanting us to take notice and change things? Early last year, me and my youngest daughter was cleaning an empty house to make extra money. Being sensitive to spirit guides, I picked up a presence, but chose to ignore it and clean the home. My daughter kept hearing someone tell her to come upstairs, and she wouldn't do it. As evening approached, we headed upstairs to vacuum the bedrooms. Whatever the presence was, it kept on blocking the vacuum from the wall and threw a marble at the wall also. I also felt a cold hand attempt to brush me down the stairs as I was going from one bedroom to the other. I dropped the vacuum and fled down the stairs, telling whatever it was that we would be back the next day. As we were locking the door, we felt someone on the other side trying to stop us from locking up and leaving. The next day, I lit a white candle and stood at the foot of the stairs. I simply stated we were here to do a job and mean no harm to him. I also said that we would leave as soon as the house is clean. After that, we felt them. They let us do our job. The house is rented now, and I won't step foot on the property anymore. I had a very tall black shadow step on the house's porch and speak to me using telepathy. It told me not to come back to its territory, or else it will push me down the stairs next time. meaning I have small grandkids. That's fine by me never to go over there again. I'm still not sure what I encountered, but I didn't like it. The new tenants can deal with it. As for me, I don't need the money that bad to come in contact with whatever lives in my neighbor's house.
First off, I want to apologize in advance for the length of these stories, but I have had a few experiences spread over my 24 years that I think would be worth writing down. I will start with the house I lived in for 9 months when I was 16. This was an old Victorian on a small, and I mean small, plot of land, smack dab in a nice little residential neighborhood. I, who happened to love Victorians, yellow the most, which this house was completely delighted. The very first night I was there, things changed. I was alone with my younger sister, who was about 14 at the time, and also my little brother, who was almost 2 years old. It was late November or early December, and it was snowing out. My parents had gone back to the old house to get more of our things and to pick up a pizza for dinner. My sister and I sat on a mattress in the middle of the living room floor, reading to our brother with the radio on for some background noise. I noticed that my brother was distracted and kept looking at the stairs, and I was hearing a pounding noise. It wasn't all that loud, and easily I could have ignored it, but I decided to reach over and lower the radio, and that is when we all heard it. It was footsteps. I swear to God to this, that the sound they made was so stereotypical that it could have been used on any of those sound effects tapes people buy around Halloween. It was a heavy work boot type of a sound, but hollow, and it went down the stairs, which we had a good view of, but on which nothing was there to the naked eye, and then back up to the hall upstairs, where it completed this little trek again and again. Well, needless to say, we flipped out. My sister and I were about to go outside and sit on the porch to wait for our parents. But we had a little kid with us, and it was cold and snowing. So even though we were completely terrified, we turned up the radio as loud as we could and just sat there. I think my brother knew something was up because he was unusually quiet and just played by our feet with toy cars. Well, when our parents got home, we all but ambushed them and begged them to take us back to the old house. They, who have had their own experiences, probably believed us, but not wanting to frighten us, chalked it up to our imaginations. Other things happened in that house, like the upstairs attic light would be on all the time, even though no one really went up there. And there was one time I firmly believed that whatever was in the house touched me. I was in my bedroom and had just gotten out of the shower. I had on only a short robe and was bending over to pick up some clothes. And then I felt a tug on the back of my robe. Well, I spun around like a flash and tried to rationalize it in my head. Maybe I caught it on something, but I was in the middle of the room and there was nothing around me. All my furniture was pushed up against the walls. That really flipped me out. To this very day, I have tried and tried to relive that feeling and can't. It was so odd, it's truly hard to explain. But anyway, there were other things, like things would disappear and reappear, and my sister hated her bedroom and would often sleep in mine on the floor. My parents had their own experiences, but it wasn't until we were moving out that the footsteps returned. My mum was downstairs in the basement alone, doing laundry, when she heard someone walking around upstairs. So she went upstairs thinking it was the realtor to find the swinging doors that separated the hall from the kitchen, swinging back and forth. But there was no one there. My dad had a similar experience as well. The other experience has to do with another place we lived in, an apartment in a 3-family house. We were on the 2nd floor. This was when I was 18 or so. The first few years were relatively quiet, but whatever it was, got really started when I went away to college. The beds and the couches would shake and vibrate for no reason that my family could see. And when I came back home, I too had this happen to me. It was a really odd sensation, like someone had grabbed the sides of the bed and was shaking it. It was not a nice feeling, but lasted anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half. I was not around when other things happened, like my brother's toys would come on in the middle of the night, even though they were off. It got to the point that my dad would get up, grab the toy and fling it onto the porch. My sister also had terrible nightmares, and I had the creepy feeling of being watched while I did dishes at the kitchen sink. I could literally feel someone staring at me from the hallway. When I would get up the nerve to look, no one was ever there. I have a few other stories, but this is the most recent. My sister, partner and I were at a local cemetery that has a reputation for being haunted, and I wanted to get a couple of pictures. I had gone previously and have had no luck, but have been there when others have gotten orbs and the like. Well, first off, this cemetery always has toys on the graves. They were dolls and plastic horses. That is easily explained as there are many graves for small children, and people can either be playing jokes or being sympathetic to all the young children who died so young and are leaving them presents. But last night, in addition to the usual toys, there were other strange things, including a dead rabbit lying by a headstone, and a few feet away the torso of a dress mannequin just lying there. I don't jump to conclusions, and that can be all explained easily enough, but they still added to the atmosphere. And when you are strolling about a notoriously haunted cemetery at night on a backcountry road and spy dead animals and what looks like a dead body, well, you get freaked out. End of story. But I've done this before, and from the above and other things that have happened, I got over it. My sister was snapping off pictures left and right, and then she and my partner are looking at one, and my sister goes, "There is nothing there." And Rhonda goes, "Wait, just turn it around." Well, my sister flips and goes, "Oh, I'm so out," and bolts, and I mean bolts, across the cemetery, across the street, and into the car with Rhonda in hot pursuit. I, mind you, have been left in the dust, so to speak, since I was not beside them when they looked at the photo that spooked them so bad. I trudged after them and into the car. Mind you, I'm a little ticked off because I was having an okay time there. And when I saw the photo, my heart stopped. It is of a headstone, but off to the side of it is a man's face. It is so clear, in fact, that you can make out a white collar and a black shirt, and what seems to be a short black mustache. It is not a nice face, and on closer inspection, there is another image in the headstone of a crying baby with hands over its mouth. Now, I am not sure of the image on the headstone because I am quite aware that anything can cause an image to appear. The grain of the stone, moss on it, etc. But the face, that is another matter entirely. I do not know how in the world to explain that. It's unbelievable.